Hi everyone, welcome to the New Tech Captains episode. So, as usual, I'm accompanied by Gareth today. Hi, Gareth.
Hi guys, hi everybody, hi Jan.
And as Gareth just introduced, we are lucky today to have Jan Hollez with us, CTO and co-founder at the successful scale-up Deliverect. So, Deliverect is helping restaurants navigate, let's say, this new era of takeaway apps multiplying. So Uber Eats, Deliveroo, and that's just the two most famous in Western Europe. But there's a bunch of others, and across the world, there's probably hundreds by now. So what can I say? And 5 years, 230 millions raised, a team of 500 people. Where do you plan to stop?
that's a good question, but I think we've always seen things big, and because this is not the first startup slash scale up we've done, we've kind of used everything we've learned not to do it better or more efficiently, but to just go faster, and it has allowed us to really grow quickly at a time where it was also very needed for restaurants, because there was also a period, during COVID and so on, where they really suffered. And so we were there to make sure that we could grow with them and that they could transition quickly to this new, more digital age.
And so before we go deeper into Deliverect and your tech stack and how you build a company. So I'm a Belgian like you, but I've lived in London for more than a decade, and I don't often see successful tech stories coming from Belgium. Maybe cowboy, but electric bikes is not exactly the same. So maybe you can share about your journey through the Belgian administration and Belgian tech ecosystem and how it's helped you or how it gave you these advantages. I don't know. Like, what are the different sides you've seen?
Well, I think it's true on the one hand that it's not that common, but the tech scene is getting a bit better. Like we have had some success stories in the past. Like if you think at, for instance, a Netlog that was there at the same time you had Facebook. Well, actually, they were a bit before, and there were a lot of entrepreneurs, that were maybe there at the start, and that when the company failed, when eventually Facebook did win, they started all their own kind of thing, and you start to see a lot of tech entrepreneurs are now banding together and making a vibrant ecosystem here. um, because I think we have a lot of advantages in Belgium because of the complexities regarding different languages, taxes. Look at EU. Very often they take actually Belgium as a type of pocket-sized European Union, and so it makes us be more quickly ready for the global world. But at the same time, very often Belgians have not thought big, and stayed in their own country. And I think that's something I've always focused a lot on. Like when you have a tech startup and you don't need hardware or other things, there's nothing stopping you from seeing things global. And when I look at the first successful startup I had was called POS iOS, which was a point of
Okay.
sale for the food tech industry, for hospitality also. But there we were on the App Store, and because of that, we were not yet good at sales. But like customers literally came to us and said, like, this tech looks cool. We want to use it. How do we buy it, right? But it immediately gave us that global reach, and we had customers from Australia to North America.
Oh, and so, like, what, how would you describe Deliverect in maybe two sentences? If you had to do the elevator pitch when you were 5 years ago doing your seed rounds.
Well, I think we're a SaaS company first and foremost, and we make online food delivery much simpler and more efficient. We seamlessly connect order platforms like Uber Eats, Deliveroo, Just Eat Takeaway with the point of sale systems of the customer, and making sure that restaurants don't need to manually rekey orders, avoid mistakes, and ultimately make sure that food is quicker and warmer at the customer. So that's the very short version of what we do.
So I mean, you've got a big business. It looks like a big client base. So, and I was reading on your website, you talk about security and then high availability. So I'm just wondering, are there any interesting or unique patterns, architecture patterns that you can share or that you use to help with that? Because that's quite a
But
challenge, right?
maybe, yeah, maybe before I answer that, I think something that's not that unique for a business is that we actually focus on big enterprises as well as SMB customers. Most of the time, you do one or the other, right? And because of that, like it's not we don't just do the big ones like the KFCs, the Burger Kings, or the Taco Bells of this world, but also SMBs like I think in London you guys will know the Shoom or even certain dark kitchens. Um, and they each have their own requirements, right? And so for us, because we our software, we really quickly saw that the need was very similar for these bigger players. And it allowed us, without a lot of changes, which you normally need to do for enterprise customers, to immediately have a good fit. But on the other hand, the requirements of enterprise customers relating to security and high availability are, of course, much bigger than what you can expect from SMB customers. So from day one, I focused a lot on making sure that the tech stack we chose was able to comply with those things. And I think having done it before and having scaled, like you can't do everything from day one because that will slow you down. But there are a lot of things when you've made some mistakes and when it wasn't that efficient that you will focus a lot on. And high availability is one of them. It's one of the reasons I immediately wanted to make sure, we used Docker, we used Kubernetes, and then, I was used to working with AWS, but I thought, Google should be better at this part, or at least more innovative in the space, since they helped the development of it. So that's actually why I chose that on the DevOps side. And from day one, we've also done our infra as code. So it's very easy for us to spin up new environments and to scale them and make sure that everything runs smoothly.
You made an interesting point there, which I often have discussions with people on, which is I think you were sort of saying that at the beginning, obviously you were thinking about high availability, you were looking at these bigger customers, but when you're really small, you have to be realistic about what the threats to the business are. It's probably not the fact that you might not be achieving 4 nines, right? It might be the fact that you might not be able to make payroll in 3 months unless you get another round of funding in. So, you have to focus on what really is important. You could put a huge effort into making it extremely resilient and then run out of money. So,
Yeah, and I think that's maybe also one of the differences between CTOs that or founders as well, and that have been there from the start, because it's ultimately it's not easy. When you're on the tech side, you want to look into the future, and you want to make sure that whatever you build, it will scale, it will still work then. But the trade-offs are always there, right? And it's like you said, if you over emphasize on this too early, then it might be irrelevant. You might not even exist anymore.
Exactly,
like you need
yeah.
that right balance. And it's true for tech, but also how you structure your organization. Like everyone always loves to say we're working agile, but it's very different when you're a team of 10 or you're a team of 500. And I'm a strong believer of having the least amount of structure that you need for that phase. Because when you're with 10, you're anyway agile. Even if you never meet, when you sit next to each other, what everyone else is doing. It's very, very easy. And without any processes, you can go very, very quickly. But as you start to have more teams and as you start to have more offices that are not, so that people are not sitting in the same location, that's when you're just forced to have more structure so that people aren't doing the same thing over again, or even worse, doing things, in a way that's not that compatible with each other. So that's when you need to reinvent yourself and constantly make small changes to make sure that it's still working flawlessly.
I see. And so Jan, what is keeping you up at night to maintain Deliverect infrastructure, deliver the new features, product, recruit the team? Like, what takes hours of your sleep every week?
Well, if I'm honest, nowadays it's been more a bit about how I can free up enough time to think strategically, because I'm quite good at the other part, but as you scale, like I'm just one person, right? And I think my time is better spent if I can think more about, where we should be in 3 or 4 years. But it's very, when things are fast paced and a lot of things happen, you very easily get sucked into the operational again, even though I must say I actually have very good people that I can rely on. So I'm proud of that part, and I think that works. But there's still a few things to be done, so that I know, like, okay, if I disappear for quite a while, things would still work. And once you can do that, I think it allows you to then go to the next step again. And I think that's the current phase where we are. And I still need to figure this out, because for me, ultimately, the company at every moment in time is the biggest that I've ever been at, right? So
Yeah.
I've not led more than 500 people. So it's like each time we're with more people, that's new for me as well. So you need to, as a founder, you need to also keep up to date with that new reality.
I think, can you maybe share about your tech stack? I know you briefly started about the DevOps side, but so the cloud you use, the different languages, frameworks, infrastructure.
Yeah, so on the infra, I think I already indeed said some things. If you look at other languages, to be honest, I think people sometimes focus too much on those. I looked at it. I changed also quite a few times, during all the years that I worked in tech. And I often look at what is it that where you can find good people, because ultimately it doesn't matter, even if it's the best language. If you can't find enough people that know it, it's also not going to get you anywhere. So you need something that's popular enough that people know it, but that they're still going to want to learn it in a couple of years. And of course, you want a bit that future proofness. And so for the backend, I came from more a Java space, and I switched to Python, because I saw, on the one hand, like more and more the importance of data science, machine learning, these type of things. And like with Python, it's very easy. There's so much already there to make that switch when you need to do it. And I
Yeah,
know that as we get bigger, there's going to be a bigger and bigger focus on those type of things. And the cool thing about Python is it also gives you that flexibility between, if you want to go fast and like almost script like, you can do that. But if you want to be more rigid, it's also possible to do that, right? So you can enforce things in the places where it's needed, in the interfaces between different systems. So I quite like that part of Python. And then on the front end, we use React, because uh, we also have some native apps, and I was hoping to get some gains, from having both our web applications and our native
yeah,
apps, that we could reuse things. It's never perfect, right? We all know that, but I think still it's something that people can easily start with, even if they don't know it, and there's a quite big pool. And of course, these are the two main tech stacks, but like we have a lot of other things like Node and here and there, like for WebSockets and other things. Like
do you still program yourself?
Uh, I actually that's maybe the nice thing as well. Zong and me, when we founded the company, we each time made the first product ourselves. So we got to our first paying customers, and I think it accelerated us also a lot. And it puts us in the fortunate place where we know how to hire good people. Uh, because I'm not saying that when you have a more go-to-market background or other things, like all those things are very important, and I don't want to make it sound like those things are easy, but I think it's super hard to find the right developers and product people. And we are a product first company, right? I think if you want to uh, be in SaaS and you want to be successful, that is just super
Yeah.
important. And so finding the right people makes all the difference.
And there's some great advice there for anybody listening who is a founder CTO just trying to pick their tech stack. I think Jan just gave you some really good advice there, right? It's not necessarily the sexiest cutting edge pieces of tooling that you should be using. You need to find developers at reasonable prices, right? And build stuff quickly. So it's not always the solution. So why Google Cloud Platform?
That's actually a good question. So, like I said, I actually had a lot of experience with AWS also in the past. To be honest, though, I think like if you look at the top three, there's not too much difference in what they can or cannot do. But as I said before, if you look at everything related to Docker and Kubernetes, Google, I think, has been innovating a bit more quickly in that space. Now, whether that's really something like that would have been 100% needed or not, I think is open for debate, but it works well. Like I haven't regretted the decision at the moment, but I don't think it's like that you can really be wrong if you take another option there.
So
At
they
least
didn't just give you more credit than the others in the early days.
credits obviously have some impact as well, I think, as many people know. And if you do not know it, don't start a business and pay from day one. You can easily indeed get a quite massive amount of credits. And if I'm honest, that was part of the reason why I also in the beginning uh, tried to make sure that we would be ready for multi-cloud. We haven't yet done it, but we have not locked ourselves in. So because I think in the future it will become more important. And we've had actually times where, some quite crazy big events happened, like uh, where a whole data center in a region went down. Now, we are reliant on a lot of our partners as well. So if we are do it perfect, but Uber Eats is down or a big POS system, if they are cloud based and they're down, then it doesn't matter whether we are online or not. So uh, you can see that as a positive thing or, or a negative thing, but yeah, these dependencies are real, of course, as well.
So the next question that I was going to ask is, because I've seen this more and more recently, is there's been more kind of well-known companies who are moving back to co-located servers, getting off the cloud. So the most recent was just last week. David Heinmeier Hansen, the guy behind Basecamp, the Ruby on Rails guy. He's basically did a big blog talking about how they're moving off AWS, they're moving back to co-located servers. And he was saying, one of his reasons is he still thinks the cloud is great when you're starting out and demand is unpredictable because suddenly you need to have a whole bunch more capacity. But he said, their demand is very predictable. And he thinks there's a huge cost overhead, a lot of padding in their costs from AWS that they can now claw back, which is interesting. Would you consider that, do you think, for yourselves?
I think it's not just about predictability, it's about how much variance is there, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah.
if you have certain moments where peaks require a lot of extra hardware, well, if you do it yourself, then you need to buy it anyway, and it might do nothing for big amounts of time. And we do have quite spiky nature because people order food, not during the whole day, but like there's certain moments where they're hungry. And yes, we are in a lot of regions, but still, it's quite spiky. So I think for our type of business, it actually makes sense to use the cloud. And it all depends again, like where do you want to optimize, right? And I think focusing on being able to scale quickly up and down can also reduce costs a lot. But a lot of companies don't really look at these type of things, and then when you underinvest in it, a lot of things go hidden, a lot of issues. And then when the scale reaches a certain point, it becomes very hard to find all these problems. I think being scrappy from the start and constantly running with the bare minimum of what you need exposes issues at the right time, so that you don't overinvest in it, but you also don't underinvest in it, and it actually keeps being yeah, quite scalable. I think for CTOs that are starting, just put yourself a certain cost per user that you think is acceptable, and like it should be DevOps included. DevOps and everything you pay for infra should never exceed 10%, in my opinion. And when you do it well, you can probably get it to around 5. But I think that's a good metric, I think, to have from day one. And then I think you will be able to balance it correctly, and yeah, like I said, not over or under invest.
Yeah. And I think it's another one of those things where there isn't a binary answer, that maybe there's probably instances where you could offload some capacity to co-located hardware. I mean, like analytical stuff, processing, because you can buffer things coming out of your production servers, right? And then you've got to a very consistent load you'd apply just to analyze and produce data out of that. Maybe you put all of that onto physical servers. I don't know.
Completely agree. And I think indeed your data warehouse or other things, that's a very different thing. Like maybe that could be an option. But of course, technology like BigQuery and so on, like again, it's nice to sometimes also not have to deal with it at start. The question is again, what is your goal? And if you want to grow very, very quickly, you can't, like, it's not because you can do something, you should do something, you know, like there's only so many balls you can juggle in the air. So yeah, you just need to know if for your type of business, you're focusing on the right things.
And Jan, so we have a tradition that the person we discuss with, that we interview, presents a book that they particularly enjoy. So I don't know if you want to introduce yours.
Yeah, I can definitely talk about it. I'm not gonna give a traditional startup or business type of book, but I'm a very curious person, also quite scientific. So I have an inquisitive mind, and someone recommended to me to read the book "How the World Really Works" from Vaclav Smil, and I think. Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and it makes you think. It just touches some big topics like energy, food production, globalization, environment, future. Like those are quite big fundamental topics, and they are presented in a way where there's a lot of facts, but things you might not necessarily know, and you know it triggers. Yeah, it triggers your mind, and I had a lot of fun going through it, so I could definitely recommend it to.
So what kind is it? Is it like more like philosophical or psychology? Or?
Not really. It's hard to describe, but I think indeed it's the sort of book that a scientific person would like to read, but it's not like broad, like it's not like a paper, but at the same time it's not something which you read for how it is for the literature itself.
Yeah.
You know, it's really more the how the facts are presented in an objective way, but still piquing your interest and making you wonder why are things the way they are, or yes, just some things that are not that common anymore, that people have forgotten that is how it really works. So very interesting.
Interesting. Well, I'll add it to my to-do list of readings that keeps expanding.
Exactly.
And then I guess I had one last question, which is, I was looking on your website, and you support I think 400 integrations, and I'm wondering how do you manage that? How do you manage the vendor, these third parties making changes to there? I mean, what is that process for you?
It's not all Zapier in the background, right?
Yeah, it's not. Yeah.
No, it's a good question, because it's not an easy problem, right? And we had to solve it in a good way, because otherwise complexity would be way too big. When you start, you know, people often ask, yeah, you know, you have a channel, you have a pause, you know, you do a direct integration and you're ready. But like you said, you know, it's like M types on the one hand, N types on the other. So if you would just not optimize, you know, that would be a big complexity, and then all these things change all the time. I think that's also one of the reasons why we didn't have that much problem convincing POS partners and channels to actually integrate with us, because if they have done it once, they know what a headache
exactly.
it is. And that is not really an answer, I guess, to the question itself, but in my opinion, it's also again focus, right? Because this is what we focus on, this is what we're good at. That's exactly the thing. It's managing this type of complexity, and I think we've built the right middleware, so that a lot of things we only have to do once, and then we have dedicated teams that tackle certain of these new integrations, and then others that look at the changes. But of course, testing is very important, and turning the problem around. Like once you in a certain region, once you're big enough, when you do the top partners, then the others want to integrate with you. And when you have then a very good generic API, you become the standard. And then of course the problem is no longer on your end, but you still actually make it very easy because other partners only need to do it once, and because of the expertise we have and the tests we have, it's very easy to see if the integration they made is a good one or not, and where they need to improve upon it.
Perfect. I mean, thank you so much, Jan. We won't keep you longer and give you more time to go do more integrations. So thank you very much for taking the time today to speak with us and everybody listening.
Anytime. It was my pleasure, Ron and Gareth.
Thanks, Jan. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. See you all in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.